When I was younger, like many others, I loved to watch television. It wasn't just a pastime for me. It was a sanctuary, a portal to colorful worlds filled with laughter and imagination. My favorite channel was Noggin. I'd rush home from school every day, excitement bubbling in my stomach, eager to catch those last precious hours before the channel switched to the end at 6 o'clock. My heart raced for Moose Moose and Z Bird. I adored their quirky skits and catchy songs. Honestly, the actual shows didn't matter much to me. I was there for the joy they brought. As a kid in kindergarten, I remember how disappointed I would feel when the sign-off sequence started just before dinner. Dundee was a catchy tune, but the farewell meant my time with Moose and Z was coming to an end. Even so, I would sit glued to the screen, singing along until it was time to turn the TV off. My parents had made it very clear. No TV past 6. They said the shows on the end were too mature and could give me nightmares. Being a child easily spooked, I accepted their word, never daring to sneak a peek at what lay beyond my safe channel. My mom was a nurse, often coming home around 6 after long shifts. My dad, a bricklayer, got off work earlier. He usually dozed off on the couch after a long day. One evening in November 2007, however, everything was about to change. That night, I was nestled on the living room floor, engrossed in Noggin. I glanced back and saw my dad sprawled out on the couch, snoring softly. An idea popped into my head. Brilliant and a little bit reckless. We had another TV in the basement, connected to cable, used mainly for sports when my dad had friends over. I had memorized the channel number for Noggin, and for some reason, I felt braver than ever. My Halloween experience had been tear-free for the first time, and now I was curious about what my parents had deemed too scary for me. At 5:45, I quietly switched off the living room TV, hoping my dad wouldn't wake up. I tiptoed down to the basement, shut the door behind me, and found the remote hidden between the couch cushions. With a press of a few buttons, I tuned into Noggin just as Max and Ruby was airing. I felt a thrill of excitement. But then, the clock on the wall flickered to 6 o'clock. The screen faded to black, and I anticipated the familiar tune of Dundee. Yet, something felt off. The clock ticked on. 6:01. Then 6:02. I thought maybe the channel was lagging. But when a low humming sound began to emanate from the speakers, unease crept in. It was a noise I had never heard before. As the humming grew louder, the screen started to display something. It was Moose Moose again, but the colors were unnaturally saturated. The audio was distorted, barely recognizable. "Are you ready?" A voice echoed, but it sounded wrong, like it was being played backward. I shivered, feeling my heart race. Then, the screen froze. Moose's face was pixelating, the cheerful visage morphing into something grotesque. Suddenly, in place of his bright eyes, a pair of bloodshot, human-like eyes blinked slowly, turning red as they reopened. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't right. My fingers gripped the couch, a cold dread settling over me. The screen cut to black, and the humming continued, deeper now, resonating in my bones. When it faded back, the image was hauntingly clear. A little girl, no older than 3, sat alone on the kitchen floor. She wore a pink gingham dress and had blue eyes, her blonde hair tied up in cheerful pigtails. Clutching a doll dressed just like her, she hummed a nursery rhyme, rocking it back and forth. But something was wrong. The girl's gaze turned from the doll to the camera, unblinking and eerie. As I watched, her pupils began to expand, engulfing the blue and turning her eyes black. I felt sick. My mind raced. This wasn't part of the programming I loved. A dark liquid began to ooze from the cabinets behind her, pooling around her feet as she whispered,
"You'll die one day."
My heart dropped. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The screen cut to black again, but this time, it was interrupted by the blaring sound of the emergency alert system. My stomach churned as beeping filled the air. Words began to flash on the screen, but I could only make out one thing. Hope. My skin crawled, and just as I registered the word, the screen went black again. Then those bloodshot eyes reappeared, staring straight into my soul. A reversed song started playing, the melody warped and haunting. The cable box began to vibrate violently on the TV stand, and a strange, chemical smell filled the air as smoke began to rise. I was terrified. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. With a sudden pop, the TV screen went dark and the cable box stopped vibrating, but the smoke lingered like a ghost in the room. My mind raced. What just happened? Who was that girl? And why did she speak of death? I stumbled up the stairs, adrenaline surging. I couldn't bear to tell my dad what I had witnessed, so I merely said there was a funny smell coming from the cable box. He didn't seem to notice my fear. Perhaps he was still groggy from sleep. I didn't even have to plead to sleep on his bedroom floor that night. The next morning, I awoke to my mom gently shaking me. She sat me down with a bowl of Apple Jacks and turned on the TV, the familiar jingle of Noggin filling the room. I expected horror but found only normalcy. An episode of Miss Spider's Sunny Patch Friends played without a hitch. Relieved yet anxious, I finished breakfast, hoping my nightmare had been a bad dream. That afternoon, I returned home determined not to watch TV. I was still shaken and too scared to step into the basement. Instead, I opted to color. Unable to find paper, I picked up the morning newspaper left on the kitchen table. While scribbling, my eyes caught a glimpse of an article in the missing children's section. My heart dropped. There she was. The little girl from the TV. The same blonde hair, blue eyes, and pink dress matched perfectly. My mind raced as I read the title. Missing, last seen in her kitchen. My hands trembled, and there it was again, that chilling word in bold letters. Hope. Suddenly, I felt like the walls were closing in. I dropped the newspaper, the eerie echoes of that night flooding back. What had I stumbled into? What darkness lurked behind the screen? The cheerful facade of Noggin had turned into a haunting nightmare, and I was left alone, trapped in a world that had turned upside down. I fled the kitchen, heart pounding, knowing I could never look at my childhood sanctuary the same way again. The laughter of Moose Moose now echoed like a warning, a chilling reminder of the horrors that sometimes hide in the most innocent of places.